What would you do if you arrived at your high school reunion in a taxi and everyone laughed? The cameras didn't flash for Claire when she stepped out of that old yellow cab. Her dress was simple, her shoes weren't designer, and her name didn't echo through the ballroom like the others. They thought she was just a nobody. But what they didn't know, what no one saw coming, was who her husband really was. And when the truth arrived, it didn't just silence the room. It changed everything. It was a golden evening in late spring when Claire adjusted the strap of her simple white dress and stepped into the back of a worn yellow taxi. The scent of cherry blossoms drifted through the cracked window, mixing with the faint smell of vinyl and old cologne from the driver's seat. As the cab rattled down the city streets, her reflection flickered in the glass. A soft, thoughtful face with eyes that held more hope than confidence. She smoothed her hair and tried to breathe. Tonight was her 10-year high school reunion, and she had almost talked herself out of going. Outside the Fairmont Grand Hotel, valet attendants ushered guests from sleek black BMWs, matte finished Teslas, and spotless white Range Rovers. Women in designer gowns laughed with men in sharp suits under the glint of a crystal marquee. Then her taxi pulled in, a beat-up yellow cab that coughed when it stopped. A few heads turned, laughter floated in the air. Claire stepped out, heels touching marble. She stood tall, holding her clutch like a shield. From across the entrance, she heard a familiar voice slice through the noise. Syrupy, amused, and unmistakable. Well, still riding cabs, Claire? Natalie Andrews stood beside her brand-new Porsche, the same smug twist on her lips she wore back in senior year. She hadn't changed. Gold heels, sculpted hair, and a laugh that demanded attention. You could have at least used Uber Black. This is a classy event, you know. Claire smiled softly. It still gets me from A to B. Natalie chuckled. Sure, but some of us upgraded after high school. Claire didn't answer. She simply walked toward the ballroom doors, the cool spring wind brushing her shoulders like a whisper from her past. She didn't come to impress anyone. She didn't need a car to prove her worth. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone else would be arriving tonight, and he would change everything. The ballroom shimmered like a dream that belonged to someone else. Golden chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks above polished floors, and laughter floated through the air like bubbles in champagne. Claire stepped in slowly, her heels tapping against marble, her breath catching as the familiar faces of the past swirled around her. Some older, some leaner, some exactly the same. Every corner of the room buzzed with stories from a decade ago, but none of them included her. Not really. A waiter passed by with flutes of Prosecco. Claire took one, just to have something to hold. She wandered toward the edge of the room, careful not to interrupt the glossy conversations and oversized hand gestures of former classmates trying too hard to outshine each other. She spotted Jeremy Cole, the former football captain turned real estate agent, laughing a little too loudly near the buffet. Next to him, Lauren, the prom queen turned beauty vlogger, adjusted her silk dress and sipped her wine like it was a camera prop. They both turned as she approached. Well, look who finally showed up, Jeremy said with a smirk, eyes scanning her from head to toe. Claire Bishop, in the flesh. Claire smiled. Hey Jeremy, Lauren. Lauren tilted her head. Wow, I almost didn't recognize you. I guess some things haven't changed. Claire blinked. Like what? Well, you've still got that whole minimalist thing going on, Lauren said, her voice syrupy and fake. No offense, it's kind of refreshing, like anti-glam. Jeremy laughed. You still in, what, graphic design? Freelance designer, Claire corrected gently. I run my own projects. Lauren raised an eyebrow. So, still hustling? Claire nodded, calm. Still creating. But the circle around them had grown. More people had gathered, half curious, half cruel. Claire felt the walls closing in. She sipped her drink slowly, the bubbles burning slightly at the back of her throat. Natalie reappeared like a shadow. So, tell us, Claire, no husband, no car, no corporate ladder? Claire straightened her back. I have what I need. Natalie leaned in. That's cute, really. But don't you ever get tired of pretending? There was laughter, not loud, but sharp. The kind that slices before you see it coming. Claire held her ground. She looked at them, these polished echoes of adolescence, and realized they still measured worth by the price tag on a purse or the size of a ring. She looked down at her modest dress, then back up with quiet fire in her eyes. "I don't pretend," she said. "I just don't need an audience." And then she turned, walking away as the room whispered behind her. What they didn't see, what Claire herself didn't yet realize, was that the spotlight was already following her. And very soon, the entire room would be watching her for a different reason entirely. Outside, the air was cooler, softer, laced with the scent of jasmine from the hotel's private garden. Claire stood near the stone fountain, its gentle trickle muffling the echoes of laughter and judgment that still rang in her ears. She checked her phone. No messages. She had told him not to come, said she'd be fine. But the knot in her stomach was starting to tighten, and suddenly she didn't want to be alone out here. She hesitated, then dialed. It only rang once. "Claire?" His voice, low and familiar, poured into her like warm sunlight. She closed her eyes. "Hey," she whispered. "You okay?" he asked, reading between her silence. She tried to smile, even though he couldn't see it. "Yeah, just the usual reunion vibes. Some old classmates are doing the whole rich and rude thing. Nothing I can't handle." There was a pause, then gently, "Do you want me to come?" She hesitated. Part of her wanted to protect him from this world, from the performance, the scrutiny, the pettiness. He had always lived simply, worn old hoodies, drank diner coffee, wrote code-like music. He was hers, and she had liked it that way. No fuss, no flash. "You don't have to," she said softly. "I know you're busy." "I'm already on my way," he replied. Her heart jumped. "You are?" He chuckled. "Yeah. I had a feeling you'd need an extraction. 15 minutes. She laughed under her breath, the tension in her chest beginning to ease. "What would I do without you?" "Hopefully we'll never have to find out," he said. As she hung up, something shifted. The fear, the shame, the feeling of being less than. It all began to melt. He was coming. He always came for her. Back inside, the music swelled and glasses clinked. But Claire didn't notice. She was staring at her reflection in the glass doors, wondering how to explain to him what had just happened. What she didn't know was that he already knew, because someone had seen everything, from the balcony above, just out of view. And he wasn't just her husband. He was the one man in that building with the power to flip every table in that ballroom. Claire stepped back into the ballroom just as the jazz band began to play something slow and nostalgic. The dimmed lights shimmered across wine glasses and polished shoes, and for a brief second, the room almost felt magical, until she heard his voice. "Well, well, Claire Bishop." She turned slowly. Standing near the bar with a glass of scotch in his hand was Brandon Kessler, her high school boyfriend, the one who broke her heart senior year with a shrug and a smug smile. He looked almost exactly the same, only older, richer, and somehow colder. He walked toward her with the confidence of a man who thought he still mattered. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, flashing the same crooked grin that once made her weak. "Still as beautiful as ever?" Claire forced a polite nod. "Brandon?" "Funny," he continued. "You haven't changed a bit. Still that quiet girl in the back of the room. Still riding cabs, huh?" His words stung more than she wanted them to, but she refused to let it show. "I didn't realize transportation defined us now," he laughed. "Everything defines us now, Claire. Job titles, cars, status. It's the world we live in." She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds exhausting." Before he could respond, Natalie appeared beside him, curling her fingers into his arm like she was claiming a prize. "Oh, you two remember each other?" she said, eyes glittering with glee. "Isn't it sweet? High school sweethearts, right?" Claire looked from Natalie to Brandon. "You two are together?" Natalie smiled. "New, but promising. He's got ambition and taste." Brandon looked Claire over again. "But if I'm honest, there's something about the past that always pulls you back in. Maybe we should talk sometime, for old time's sake." Claire's stomach turned, not because she missed him, but because she realized how little he'd grown, how much he still enjoyed power games. He didn't want her. He wanted to see if he could still shake her. "I don't think my husband would enjoy that," she said calmly. Natalie blinked. "You're married?" Brandon's smirk faded. "Really? To whom?" Before Claire could answer, a soft hum swept through the room as a new guest stepped inside. Sharp suit, calm eyes, presence like gravity. Ethan, he wasn't smiling. He was watching Brandon, watching Natalie, watching Claire. He had seen enough, and he was done being invisible. The moment Ethan crossed the threshold of the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted, conversations dimmed, heads turned. Not because anyone recognized him, but because something about him demanded attention. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that couldn't be bought, the kind built from knowing exactly who you are and never needing to prove it. Claire's breath caught the second she saw him. He was no longer in his usual hoodie and jeans. Tonight, he wore a tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and a narrow black tie that hugged his frame like it had been made just for him. But it wasn't the clothes. It was the way he walked, the subtle nod he gave the doorman, the way the air seemed to follow him in. Claire stepped away from Brandon and Natalie, her heels clicking against marble as she met him halfway. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said, his voice low and warm, "but I wanted to see you." And then, without hesitation, he leaned down and kissed her forehead, tender, unapologetic, in full view of the people who had just spent the last hour mocking her. A murmur rippled across the room. Natalie blinked. "Wait, that's your husband?" Brandon narrowed his eyes. "Seriously?" Ethan turned, his eyes locking on them with calm precision. "Nice to meet you," he said evenly. "I've heard a lot about this reunion." Jeremy, standing nearby with a whiskey glass, let out a low chuckle. "Looks like you clean up well, man. What do you do?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I consult, mostly tech and development." "Freelance?" Lauren chimed in. "Sort of," Ethan replied. "I have my own firm." Natalie crossed her arms. "And you let your wife arrive in a taxi?" "She prefers it," Ethan said smoothly. "She didn't want to show off." Brandon scoffed. "Sounds like a convenient excuse." But before another word could be spoken, the hotel's MC tapped the mic on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed, "we'd like to take a moment to thank the generous donor who made this evening possible. Without his support, tonight wouldn't have happened." Everyone turned toward the projector screen, and then the name appeared, bold, unmistakable. "Special thanks, Mr. Ethan Prescott, CEO of Prescott Global Holdings." Silence fell like a thunderclap. Claire's mouth parted, stunned. Natalie's wine glass slipped out of her hand. Brandon went pale. Jeremy muttered, "Wait, Prescott? The Prescott?" The air thickened. Claire looked up at Ethan, eyes wide. "You never told me your last name." He glanced down, sheepish. "I liked being just Ethan. But you're—" He gently took her hand. "Still just your husband." But now the entire room was looking, and no one was laughing anymore. The ballroom buzzed with stunned silence as the screen faded to black. Whispers broke like ripples on a still lake, hushed but urgent. Claire stood frozen, her fingers still laced with Ethan's. Around them, the people who had laughed now stared, not with amusement, but with dawning realization. The man in the suit, the one they had dismissed as some low-level tech guy, was the very reason they were all sipping champagne under a chandelier tonight. Natalie blinked hard, her mouth struggling to form a coherent sound. Prescott Holdings, as in... Ethan gave a polite smile. "Yes, that one." Brandon looked like he'd swallowed glass. "You're the guy behind the Westport Tower and the Hartfield redevelopment." Ethan nodded. "Among other things." Claire's world spun. She turned to him slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You never told me." "I didn't want to be that guy," he said gently. "I didn't want you to fall for the empire. I wanted you to fall for me." And she had. In every bookstore visit, in every late-night talk, in every coffee-stained morning, she had fallen for the man who once helped her carry a stack of design books and didn't laugh when she said she liked sketching with chalk. He had never needed to impress her. That was the whole point. Natalie tried to recover, stepping forward with a forced laugh. "Well, I guess someone's been keeping secrets. Claire, why didn't you tell us?" Claire turned, her voice clear now. "Would you have believed me?" Natalie's smile faltered. "Of course." "I mean, we're friends, right?" "No," Claire said, calm and steady. "You've never been." Jeremy raised his glass awkwardly. "Well, this is surprising. But hey, congrats, right?" Ethan's gaze hardened just slightly. "If only your manners matched your surprise." Lauren edged closer, eyes wide with curiosity. So, Claire, what's it like being married to one of the richest men in the state? Claire glanced up at Ethan, then back at them. It's like being married to someone who brings you tea when you're sick and listens when you ramble about color palettes. That's what it's like. There was no microphone in her hand, but it felt like the whole room heard her. Natalie stared. You really came here? In a taxi? Ethan smiled. At her request. Claire met Natalie's gaze and added, because I didn't come to show off. I came to remember who I was. And now, because of him, and in spite of them, she would never forget again. The mood in the ballroom had changed, but not for the better. It was as if someone had drawn back a curtain and revealed a truth no one was prepared to face. The people who once smirked now smiled too brightly. The ones who had rolled their eyes at Claire's cab ride now leaned in, desperate to rewrite the narrative. But she saw it all. The shift, the scramble, the sudden politeness felt more like panic. Jeremy was the first to approach. Hey, Claire, I've got a buddy looking for a lead designer. Maybe you and I could chat sometime. Claire tilted her head. Oh, I thought I was still hustling. He laughed nervously. Come on, that was just, banter. Then Lauren appeared, eyes sparkling like she was ready to film a makeup tutorial. Claire, I'm obsessed with your dress, so effortlessly chic, and I had no idea you were married. Where'd you two meet? A bookstore, Claire replied plainly. Ugh, that's so romantic, Lauren gushed, her tones syrupy. You have to come on my podcast sometime. We do this segment called Unexpected Love, and I don't really do interviews, Claire cut in, her voice soft but final. From a few feet away, Natalie watched it all unfold. Her arms crossed tightly across her chest, her smile frozen like cracked porcelain. She walked over slowly, Brandon trailing behind like a shadow that had lost its shape. So, Natalie said, voice clipped, you married a billionaire and didn't think that was worth mentioning? Claire raised an eyebrow. I didn't think it was worth performing. Natalie gave a tight laugh. You're acting like you're above all this, but look around. You brought him here. You let him donate. You wanted us to see. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low but unmistakably firm. She didn't want anything from you. Natalie blinked. She came here to reconnect. You turned it into a courtroom. Claire looked at her calmly. You laughed at me when I stepped out of that taxi. Well, Natalie said sharply. It was funny. Claire smiled. No, it was honest. Which is more than I can say for everything else in this room. Just then, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Our car's outside. Natalie narrowed her eyes. So, no more taxis? Claire looked at her, then turned to Ethan. Let's walk. Ethan smiled, understanding. Of course. And as they left, hand in hand, her head held high, no one dared laugh anymore. Outside, the night air was crisp, laced with the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Streetlights cast long, golden shadows across the pavement as Claire and Ethan stepped down the marble steps of the hotel, leaving behind glitter and whispers. A sleek black car idled at the curb. Its windows were tinted, its engine humming quietly like a held breath. Ethan opened the rear door for Claire, but she paused, her eyes drawn to the figure in the driver's seat. Something about the silhouette made her chest tighten. The man stepped out, adjusting his cap before circling the car. His face came into view, weathered, familiar, and impossibly real. Claire froze, her voice cracked. Dad? The world around her blurred as her father, James Bishop, stood just a few feet away, eyes wide, heart in his throat. He took off his cap slowly, like he wasn't sure she'd really see him. I didn't want you to find out like this, he said softly. Claire's breath caught. Her father had disappeared when she was 16. One night he left, promising to fix everything. He never came back. For years she thought he was dead. For years she hated him for it. What are you doing here? She whispered. Ethan stepped forward, wrapping a gentle arm around her. He's been working with us. Quietly. For over a year now. I found him through a contact while we were expanding into Chicago. Claire turned to Ethan, stunned. You knew? He nodded. He told me not to say anything. He didn't think he deserved to see you. Said he wasn't ready. Her father's eyes shimmered under the streetlight. I wanted to come back a better man. I didn't want to be the ghost that ruined your life. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. So many memories came rushing back. His hands teaching her to draw, the way he tucked her in at night, the sound of his old guitar through her bedroom wall. "You were gone," she whispered, "and I needed you." James lowered his head. "I know, and I've lived with that every day." Silence stretched between them, tender and raw. Then, slowly, Claire stepped forward. Her voice shook. "You're here now." He looked up. "If you'll have me." She wrapped her arms around him like a daughter who had waited 10 years for this one embrace. And just like that, the cracks in her heart began to close. Ethan watched quietly, his chest rising with emotion. He had planned this moment carefully, hoping it would come. But watching it unfold, he realized something else. He hadn't just given Claire back her past. He had given her a future she didn't know she was still waiting for. The drive home was quiet, not the awkward kind, but the kind filled with soft, unspoken warmth. Claire sat in the back seat, her hand resting gently in Ethan's, her father at the wheel, glancing at her from the mirror, like he still couldn't believe this night was real. City lights blurred past the windows, as if the world outside couldn't keep up with what had just shifted inside her. Back at the penthouse, the elevator doors opened to a view that still took Claire's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, soft piano music drifting from the sound system, and a flickering fireplace casting gold onto polished wood floors. But something was different tonight. A small envelope lay waiting on the marble kitchen island. Her name was written across it in Ethan's hand. "What's this?" she asked, confused. He nodded toward it gently. "Open it." Claire peeled it open slowly, her fingers trembling with a weight she didn't understand until she unfolded the papers inside. A deed. Her name. A sleek sunlit building on Park Row. Bishop & Co. Design Studio. Her eyes snapped up. "Ethan, what is this?" He took a step closer. "It's yours." She shook her head, stunned. "This building, it's a landmark. The glass facade, the rooftop gallery. This is huge." He smiled softly. "You once said you dreamed of owning a space where artists could breathe, where no one had to justify their talent or apologize for not fitting in. So I bought it, and I put your name on the front door." Claire's throat tightened. "Why would you do that?" "Because the world needs what's in you," Ethan said, his voice steady. "And because I never want you to feel small again. Not in a room, not in a taxi, not in a ballroom full of people who never saw you." Tears spilled freely now. "You didn't have to fix everything for me." "I didn't fix anything," he whispered, touching her face. "I just cleared the space so you could finally take up the room you deserve." She dropped the papers on the counter and threw her arms around him, the sob catching in her throat, more relief than sorrow. For so long she had carried the weight of silence, of shame, of not being enough. And now, someone had built her a home made of glass, just so she could see how far her light could go. That night, as the city glittered beneath them and her father quietly unpacked his few belongings in the guest room, Claire stood at the window with Ethan, her head on his shoulder. The girl who once rode in a yellow cab now owned a building the world would soon know by name. And somehow, that wasn't even the most beautiful part. The beautiful part was knowing she hadn't changed. She had only come home to herself. 2 weeks later, a photo went viral, not on purpose, not staged, but captured by a local photographer who had been walking past the grand opening of a new design studio downtown. The image showed a woman in a simple cream dress standing beneath a sleek silver sign that read, "Bishop & Co." Beside her was a tall man in a tailored suit, his arm around her waist, their faces turned toward each other in quiet, joyful conversation. Behind them, a crowd applauded. Above them, the city skyline gleamed like it was saluting her return. Claire hadn't wanted a launch party, but Ethan insisted, "This isn't for you. It's for the girls who think they don't belong, who thinks they have to arrive in something expensive to be seen." So, she stood in front of the cameras, not because she wanted the attention, but because she knew someone out there needed to see her. Back at the hotel ballroom, whispers still lingered. "Did you hear? Claire's husband owns half the district. She owns that new creative hub now. Name's right on the door. Didn't she show up in a taxi that night?" Oh, they remembered. They remembered how they laughed when she stepped out of that yellow cab, clutching her thrifted clutch and handmade earrings. They remembered the way she stood alone, smiling through the sting, and they remembered how everything changed when her husband walked in. Not just because he was rich, but because he looked at her like she was worth more than anything money could buy. Claire didn't return to the reunion the next year. She didn't need to, because the girl they once overlooked now stood taller than every chandelier they'd ever danced under. Because when you walk in truth, you don't have to shout. The world will echo your story without you ever saying a word. Sometimes love arrives quietly. Sometimes power wears soft smiles and sketch-stained fingers. And sometimes the girl who takes a taxi to the party leaves in the hearts of everyone who thought she didn't belong. They'll never forget her again. They mocked her for not owning a car. They whispered because she wore thrift store jewelry and smiled like it was enough. But they didn't understand, until it was too late, that she never needed their approval. She had something they couldn't fake: quiet strength, real love, and a heart that never measured worth in price tags. And in the end, the girl who stepped out of a cab, she drove away with dignity, her father's forgiveness, and the keys to her own empire. So laugh if you must. But remember, some of the richest women in the world arrive in silence and leave unforgettable.